Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today, an architect breaks down why all American diners look like that. And I feel like we know what that means.
We do, definitely. Well, I think I know what that means.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know what, I don't actually know what
describe
that is, but I know exactly what an American diner looks like. And
Yeah.
in my head, it's like checkered flooring,
Yeah.
big leather booths.
Yeah, leather booths is what, like
Yeah.
with the chairs which have like the bumps
Bright
and the
light.
ripples,
Yeah.
table in it, each
Yeah.
side on the booth.
With the little stools maybe on the end of the booth.
Yeah, bright lights, like you said. Also, people sat at the countertop as well.
Yeah.
That feels quite American.
Very retro-y.
Retro, yeah, retro vibes. I was going to say, feel like you've got a jukebox in there as
I
well.
was saying on the stream when we were planning the trip on the stream marathon that I did last week. We need to go to a diner when we come.
Yeah, we did go. We didn't go to a proper diner, did we?
I have been to an American diner in
No.
Paris.
Oh, whoa! You can't.
Disneyland.
No.
In Disneyland, I went to Annette's Diner, and it is basically based on an American diner.
You've had things based on.
You know what they were doing? They roller skated around, giving things.
That feels very American. I've seen them in the UK diners which are meant to be American, and they do look like them.
I guess a similar thing would be TGI's.
Yeah, TGI's is in
Diner
theory
vibes.
It's not quite what I would picture an American diner, but it's close.
No, it's like a franchise diner. It's not
Yeah,
like a typical
definitely.
local.
But I don't think it counts if you've been to one because it was in Paris. You have to go to one in America to get the full experience.
Well, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. One day. Let's go.
Everyone knows what a classic American diner looks like, which is so recognizable that it's been exported around the world as a symbol of American culture. But why do they look that way? Hi, I'm Michael Weitzner, and I've been an architect for over 35 years. Today, we're breaking down how architecture and design elements from 3 different eras of U.S. history work together to give the classic American diner that nostalgic glow.
Okay. It does give a proper retro feel.
So let's take a look at a typical American diner. So the outside has a shape that's reminiscent of a train. In fact, that's how diners got their name. They're named after the dining car on a train.
Oh, wow.
Many of the design elements in a diner are based on the necessities of dining on a train in a railroad car, like booth seating and counter seating and an open kitchen. So I like these 2 photos because they show all the elements that go into the classic American diner. On the exterior, you have that stainless steel, smooth curvature. You've got that Art Deco typography. And then on the interior, you have the checkered floor.
That's what you
the
said?
Booths.
That's what you said?
You have the globes.
I didn't say globes.
No, I didn't say globes, but you almost got it.
Yeah, I knew. That's just in my mind. That is exactly what an American diner is.
Yeah, I think the only thing that one's missing in my mind is just the counter. People sat at the countertop. It feels a little bit a bigger diner. I think of movies where you get the small ones where it's only the row seating by the windows and then you got the countertop and that's it. That's what I think of proper American diner.
Yeah, definitely.
Just from TV and movies.
And you have the jukebox. In the early part of the 20th century, trains were the dominant form of travel. If you look at some of the earliest diners, they were in fact actual train cars that were placed permanently on the ground.
Oh, wow.
Let's take a look at one
cool.
now. I love this photo. This is a classic American diner that takes place in an actual dining car that was just taken off the tracks and put on the ground and made into a building. You could see that it's actually a train car with the upper windows there for ventilation and the main windows here for viewing. And you could see how narrow it is, which necessitated a certain kind of design. There's a counter, 1 row of booths, and an open kitchen. And that became some of the classic identifiable features of the American diner. So train travel peaked in the 1920s. Fewer than 10% of Americans drove a car. But by 1950, that had tripled. And unlike with trains, people in cars could stop anytime they wanted. So diners, cafes, motels, and other types of buildings that relied on people coming through their doors started to adapt their designs to people driving in cars going 40 miles an hour. They wanted to be eye-catching. And one of the most important examples of this is Googie's in Los Angeles. So here's a picture of Googie's, which is actually designed by John Lautner, who was somewhat of a famous American modernist architect who did the famous Chemosphere house.
Oh, that
looks like a flying saucer that landed in the Hollywood Hills. But the thing I love about this photo in particular is there's a whole style of architecture which is named after this diner called Googie's. Googie architecture was very optimistic, very exuberant. It was about abstraction and signage and brightness. What I really like about this diner is it looks like it could have been designed in the late 1980s as a deconstructivist piece of architecture with these planes that are connected by glass that almost look like they're falling down. So Googie architecture was coined by the critic Douglas Haskell, who was referring to this diner. It's about loud signs and attention-getting buildings.
Yeah, that just feels, that's an example of a loud signs. It does feel loud, doesn't it? Which makes sense. You got to get customers, and especially back then, if it was a new thing, you need to be eye-catching, don't you? Yeah, which is why. And again, I feel like the neon lights is what gives it a retro feel as well.
Yeah, definitely. It all adds to the vibe, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Sorts of forms. It takes sort of mid-century modern architecture and takes it to a different, less serious place. And it's about a sort of optimism towards the future. Started in the 1950s, that was very influenced by space age sort of technology. Even though it takes its name from this building, this is actually not a prime example of it. It actually morphs into something else. And other designs took the idea of appealing to motorists even further, designing buildings in such a way that motorists didn't even have to leave their car. Let's look at some examples. Okay, this is such a cool photograph because basically what it is, very simple square building in the middle, and then it's surrounded by this circular form. And from this,
that's sick. So if they push your food out on there, that's actually really cool. I'd get behind having one of them nowadays.
That's some like modern thinking.
Yeah, I mean it takes up a lot of space, doesn't it?
Yeah, but not really, because that would all be parking spaces anyway.
I actually think that's sick. Yeah, that's actually really cool.
The thing is, how do you close it?
What do you mean?
How do you close? Anyone could go in at any time, I guess.
I guess you can put them down to it. I don't know. Or maybe you can pull the ladders in.
Yeah, probably.
I don't know. I get what you mean, though. It's easy to access if you can't fully shut it, but that is cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
There are little conveyor belts that bring the food out to the cars. I just think that's brilliant. The building is actually designed as a hub and spokes, which is actually sort of like a wheel, unintentional or not. And so the signage says it's better food. But not only that, it says no tipping. And that's not an instruction. That's actually a benefit that they're advertising. Hey, no waiters, no waitresses.
Oh, okay.
Are you
that
looking
makes sense.
for reliable
people save a bit of money, don't they?
So people are still getting the food they want, but they don't have to pay a little bit extra.
Yeah, exactly. And you think, oh,
it's always a benefit to save money. So.
Exactly. I don't have to get my car. I don't have to tip.
Why would you not do it?
Let's go for it. And it's better food.
Let's take a look at another example. So working on that hub and spoke idea is this sort of circular building, which is very Googie in that it's starting to look a little like a flying saucer.
Yeah.
Or something a little space age. And what's great about this one is the cars pull right up, but they actually get served by actual people in this one. But it's still a circular building, which is sort of the most efficient way to maximize the amount of cars that can pull up to the front of your building. So basically the building sits in the middle of a parking lot so that cars could come from any direction and pull up and get served.
Makes sense.
And talk about eye-catching. Look at all that neon. Can't miss
very
signage.
bright.
So the popularity of cars continued to increase. And with it, so did Googie-style architecture, which was meant to appeal to the car. And that sort of culminated in Las Vegas.
Oh, wow.
So let's take a look at the iconic Las Vegas sign. So no one driving into Las Vegas can miss this sign. And I love this sign. There's so much going on. All it says is welcome to fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. But within that, there's like 4 different types of typography. There's a starburst at the top. There's this amorphous chevron shape that forms the backdrop. The letters are in these circles for welcome, which one might read as the planets. There's the scripted fabulous, the bright red block letter Las Vegas, and then the smaller Nevada. And it all stands and is supported on this blue armature. Nothing says Googie to me like this sign. So a lot of these flourishes in Googie architecture are really very cartoony, and it almost goes hand in hand with the rise of television at the same time as the rise of the automobile. And these sort of very simple shapes and these very two-dimensional cartoony ideas are part of that. So this is probably the most iconic of those sorts of signs that are representative of Googie. But if you drive anywhere in America, especially in the 50s and 60s, there were tons of other signs for bowling alleys and motels and diners and cafes, and they're ubiquitous throughout the country, especially along the highways. As the excitement of car travel reached its zenith, people were already imagining what would come next. In 1955, for the first time, more people traveled by airplane than they did by train. That same year in 1955, the space race officially kicked off.
Yeah.
So when Russia launched the Sputnik satellite in 1957, the space race kicked into high gear, culminating with the US landing a man on the moon in 1969. So we went from eating in a train to eating in a car, and now let's start eating in a spaceship. The theme building at LAX.
Wow.
This is such a cool building.
Cool.
Essentially,
That is very
it's a
cool.
flying saucer hovering in the
love
air
flying
where
saucers.
you can eat. And it's supported by these two
That's at
main
the airport.
arches,
That's
which
some
are
good view.
actually steel covered
Wait,
in
didn't we fly
stucco.
into LAX?
Yeah, we did. I think I did see that, to be fair. I didn't know it was a cafe or
I
something.
can't remember
Or a
if I saw it
diner.
or not. Obviously, we didn't.
No, me, I probably thought it was the airport control tower.
Yeah, we did fly out of LAX as well, didn't we?
We flew in and out.
How did I not notice this?
I definitely saw it. I think it's in my pictures, but I recognise it.
We were
I
at a
didn't obviously
hotel
notice
right
it that.
close to it as well, weren't we? I don't think we'd been able to see it out of our, I'd have noticed it if we could see it out of our hotel window.
No, we didn't, definitely. But I think we definitely would have seen it flying in.
Yeah, I was driving.
You wouldn't have driven near that, I don't think.
How did we get to the airport? I dropped the car for the car hire. Did we get a taxi?
We got on the shuttle. No, we didn't.
Yes, we did. We got on the
Got on the
shuttle. Yeah,
shuttle.
sorry. I was it was early morning, so I was obviously
Your
just too
sister
tired
stayed.
to pay attention.
Yeah, your sister stayed. Because you and your mum dropped off the night before, didn't you?
Yeah, the car. Anyway, sorry, a little bit. I was just thinking about the trip. Yeah, I didn't notice that, but that's cool. We should have gone up it if we could have.
Yeah.
Shame.
Although they appear to be concrete. And there's a central tower that brings you up into this sort of disc. And within that disc is the restaurant. And what's so cool about this restaurant is it gives you views in every direction.
Yeah,
so
that's
this
a
building
good-
also
cool.
represents the evolution of sort of Googie architecture. So it takes eye-catching to
That
a
looks
whole
very
other
cool at
level.
night.
So where the round form before was based on maximizing the amount of cars you could bring around a building. Here they're staying with that round form, but they're lifting it up in the air to make it
Yeah.
reminiscent of this sort of flying saucer, which is very much in keeping with Googie style architecture. So if this building was sort of hovering, the next building we're going to look at really takes off. And that's the Space
Oh,
Needle
yeah.
in Seattle.
That looks cool,
so this is
doesn't
sort
it?
of the tallest example that there is of Googie architecture. It continues with that sort of cartoon theme of this flying saucer sort of taking off, and it's very reminiscent of the Jetsons and what they would do in that famous cartoon. But I like that it's got this huge armature with these sort of curvilinear shapes, and it's got one disc sort of low to the ground, and this
Oh,
other
okay, I didn't know
set
that.
of discs really high where people eat and get a whole view of the city. And it sort of represents springing into the air this whole idea of space travel where the impossible becomes possible. This is what the future could be. Let's build it now. So although it appears to be very optimistic and very forward thinking, for me there was always sort of a level of dystopia involved in these buildings hovering so high, as if the earth had been destroyed and the only place to go was up.
Escape.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Who would have thought? It's mad, isn't it? Like you see all these buildings, and like some people say that they haven't been designed for that, but things will be designed
Yeah,
for these
definitely.
little things which subconsciously we'll think about. And again, some people say no, I guess, but it's cool. I like it.
think it's
I think
cool,
it's very
yeah.
cool.
Before the world came to Flushing Meadow in Queens, in New York City. And I think it was the highest
Oh.
point that this
That's
style of
interesting.
architecture would reach. And you can see, again, this sort of idea of the hovering spaceship, this mechanized architecture where it sort of plugs in, and you can see the towers that hover above, like we saw, that were just reminiscent of the Space Needle and the theme building. This was the last time this sort of architecture, which was so forward and so exuberant, it sort of ended here. So the 1964 World's Fair was all about technology and the optimism of the future and what
Okay.
could be. And then it all came crashing down. That sense of the optimism for the future and the patriotism ubiquitous in the space race came back to Earth with the rise of the Vietnam War and the fight for civil rights and the assassinations. And all of a sudden, the only parts of Googie architecture that sort of remained were the diners and the
Yeah.
eateries that had started it. And the Googie style, once a vision of the
That's cool.
future,
It looks
became a
cool.
thing of the past. So today when we see a retro diner and we think of it as a specific time in the 1950s, it's really an amalgam of architecture from the
That
1920s
was
based
actually,
on the train
this might be the one. This.
1950s.
This one? Oh.
So today when we see a
When-
retro diner and we think of it as a
Oh,
specific time,
that one.
When that's in New York, Ellen's Stardust Diner.
Did we pass it? We must have passed that.
I don't think so, but everyone said if we do New York for that 2 days,
To go to that diner.
that diner, because they also sing as you're going out. They sing you take your order, they just sing.
Oh wow, okay.
So everyone said you have to go to that diner.
Okay,
So
interesting.
this might be our diner.
Yeah, let us know in the comments.
Do you want
Should
to
we go to Stardust?
Ellen's Stardust, yeah.
Yeah, it says Ellen's there, yeah, definitely. Let us know in the comments.
In the 1950s. It's really an amalgam of architecture from the 1920s based on the train, the 1950s based on the car, the 1960s based on space travel, and it's sort of this mashup all together.
I like that one.
Yeah, it's cool.
So to eat in a diner is to experience an expression of some of the best parts of our shared history, our optimism for the future. But in reality, it skips over many of the lowlights that were also present, such as the Great Depression, World War II, segregation, and the Vietnam War.
Can't go wrong with that.
That's good.
Yeah, let us know your favourite diner in the comments below. That's cool, I really enjoyed
That
the
was
video.
good, yeah. I really want to go to an American diner.
Want to go to American diner, learn some new architecture terms as well, which I'd never heard of before. And again, we think of a diner just as retro, it looks retro, American, but it does have bits on it, the space travel, the train. I was like, oh, well, there's a proper history of how it became to be.
I didn't know that about the trains.
Me neither.
Yeah,
Me neither.
so it was good.
Smash that button if you enjoy, guys. Smash the subscribe button. If you want to go to a diner and you want to help us out, get to America, we're looking at next April. There is a GoFundMe link in the description, just for people who do ask. And because we know the people who do ask are definitely the legends who get to the end of these videos, so that's why we mentioned it now. And yeah, we do really appreciate it. What's your video?
Have a fantastic day.
And see you legends in the next one. Peace.